One. We're live.
Good evening and welcome to the March meeting of the Morganton Planning and Zoning Commission. I am substituting for our chairman, Hank Dickens. My name is Bill Lennon as vice chair this year. And to my right, we have Commissioners Claude Huffman, Dr. Dave Kirk, Wade Gordon, and to my left, specifically Kim Wooder, Rick Lingerfeld, Don Smith, and a new addition, Doris Smith, and our recording secretary, as always, Jackie Kane. Doris, we want to welcome you to the commission, and Doris is a longtime advocate for our county and spent her business career in the insurance industry and then retired as the clerk to the Board of Commissioners of Burke County in 2012. So thank you for joining us. Dr. Dave Kirk joined us last month, and he came back for more. Thank you, Dave. That part of it. As we proceed forward today, we'll take up our usual old business. First thing is review and approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Have any comments, questions, or corrections? Seeing none, I'll say that those are approved as stand. Our next portion would be to review City Council action since our last meeting, and we ask that for Lee Anderson to take us through that, Lee.
Since our last meeting was delayed due to the bad weather, there were no items of Planning Commission interest taken up at the March 3rd council meeting. They will take up the next public hearing session on April the 3rd. So we have nothing to report.
Thank you, Lee. At this point in our meeting, we have appearances by the public. This is a stated time that we set aside for individuals now and in the future to come before the planning board to express any concerns, issues, or interests that they have that they would like to address the board. Seeing none that with us today, we will proceed forward from here to new business. And one item for consideration tonight is consideration to rezone approximately 0.7 acres of property land located at 500 Fleming Drive from heavy industrial currently to general business conditional. Lee, would you take us through that, please?
Okay, if you're turning your agenda package to rezone case number 14-002, Mull Incorporated has requested rezoning of a 0.78 acre tract at 500 West Fleming Drive. The current zoning of this property is heavy industrial, and the requested zoning is to general business conditional use. The property has been zoned for heavy industrial purposes since the 1960s. Back when the old tannery was in place, a lot of this area was completely industrial in nature, and over the past 30, 40, 50 years, it's transitioned over to more commercial type activities. HI districts, of course, allow a wide variety of manufacturing, fabrication, assembly, warehousing, and wholesale trade type uses. And generally, these areas are located away from residential areas where large setbacks are imposed and screens and where it's not bothersome as far as noise or hours of operation, vehicular movements, unsightly material storage, things of that nature. So this request would change that heavy industrial zoning to a general business conditional use classification. Typically, GB districts allow a wide variety of commercial, service, and warehousing uses, but with the conditional use process, the applicant is willing to accept certain conditions to accommodate some planning issues or adjoining property owner issues that may be brought up. The owner in this particular case has agreed to place conditions to require that all commercial activities that would be taking place on the property would be conducted within the enclosed buildings that would be on the property, or if a new building was built, would be completely within an enclosed building. Public services, there are a number of public services available to the property. It is accessed from West Fleming Drive. And West Fleming Drive is a 5-lane thoroughfare that's maintained by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. The roadway carries approximately 16,500 vehicles per day based on the latest NCDOT counts. The capacity of this roadway is 28,000 average daily trips, so we're well under the carrying capacity of the roadway. The traffic volumes have not significantly increased in the past 20 years. In fact, I was looking at the 1994 counts, and I think they were different by about 500 cars. So there hasn't been a lot of change on that particular corridor. Although that was 2012. Now, obviously, we have the new shopping center. It's opened up beyond there, so that could have changed some of those numbers. We'll know more as DOT releases new numbers with their next round of counts. Water. City has a 6-inch water line along Cox Street and both an 8 and a 12-inch line within West Fleming Drive. And these lines are of adequate size to service an industrial use or a commercial use. And I have that map provided of where those lines are in relationship to the property, which is outlined in light blue, sewer lines in yellow, and the water lines in blue. And you can see going up Cox Street. The land development plan. The Mission 2030 land development plan acknowledges that there are existing industrial uses in the area. The Case Farms area along this street and along the old railroad overpass down the street further. This has historically been used for industrial purposes, although the new Mission 2030 plan does acknowledge that most of the area in and around this particular request should go to commercial classifications and all be zoned for commercial activities. So Cox Street, all of that which is presently zoned industrial. And there's residential houses actually up in this area now, so they're non-conforming presently under an industrial classification. The purpose of this rezoning is to allow a reoccupancy of a building that is on the property that is used by was historically used by Mull Oil Company for oil distribution. And you can see on the map the existing building location. There's existing tanks on the property, above ground tanks, and some storage buildings, and of course parking areas and service areas. Was the office and dispatch office, and this was the area for loading and unloading trucks. The request is to allow commercial activities within the primary structure, which I believe is this one here. And specifically, they're talking about a tire sales and installation business on the property. Spot zoning should not be an issue since it is currently zoned as an industrial use, which is a more intensive land use, and the request follows the Mission 2030 land development plan, so there are no issues in regards to spot zoning. Property has been used for oil distribution, obviously in the past, and the West Fleming corridor we've seen transition into more retail and commercial uses. We feel like that the commercial activities will continue to expand in the future. We consider West Fleming Drive as one of the city's primary entry corridors, and we want to see future land uses that do not detract or discourage the improvements along the corridor that's been taking place over the last few years. Uses such as tire dealerships and garages, we feel like can often accumulate outdoor storage and outdoor operations where there's vehicles and debris and other things that are strewn around the property. And these uses can be unsightly along the primary entrances in the community, and the Mission 2030 plan discourages that from taking place. We would encourage that as long as things are done on the inside of the building and the outdoor storage is all on the inside, it's not allowed, it's prohibited. We would recommend the GB conditional use request be approved. Otherwise, we would recommend it be denied to prevent this change from taking place. But the owner has agreed, and we believe it would be appropriate.
Thank you, Lee. At this time, does the commissioners have any questions or they would like to address to Lee regarding what he's just covered?
If they did have storage of tires, would there be an additional building be allowed on the property?
My understanding is they want to enclose the front. This is a shed now, and they want to enclose the front of this building to put their tire storage and things in that building. And then they would build a ramp into the back of this building to where they could go in and have the tire changing area inside this building. That's the way they described it to me anyway.
So the cars and the entrance and exits of the cars and the bays are going to be off the back of the building.
That's my understanding. The owners are not here tonight. I'd ask that they be here. Obviously, they did talk about, can we display any tires for sale? We didn't address that in our rezoning recommendation. Obviously, most tire dealerships will have some display. Any commercial area will have some exterior display. But as long as it's taken in every night and it's out only during normal business hours, we wouldn't have an issue with that. We have that in many other locations in town, and we don't see any reason why this wouldn't be the case as well. There's outdoor display at the Ace Hardware just down the street, and they leave stuff out. But they usually keep it in pretty good shape. Tires are a little different animal.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there any restrictions on the size of that display? I mean, that's a large front.
There's not been any specifications on that. I know that there's a tire dealership down South Sterling Street where the outdoor display it stays, and they build this tower of tires that can be somewhat unsightly at times. So I understand it's just limited. Understanding that it's currently zoned heavy industrial, it's a step in the right direction. There could obviously industrial use is not what we want to see in the future. Hopefully, under the new ordinance and guidelines, we'll be able to better address these type of changes and change of uses, and along our main corridors, especially for our folks that are coming in from out of town. This is one of the primary corridors they would travel, going to the comma if they're coming from the west and things like that. So we want to put our base face forward, I think, for economic benefit of everybody in the future. But we have to be sensitive to that too. That the current owner, it's owned industrial. So it's a good compromise. They seem to be willing to work with us. Hopefully, it encourages reuse of the building. It's vacant right now, and
there is no plans to remove the oil tanks or so forth.
I wish they were here. That they haven't told me the tire dealership would do that. It would make sense to me that they would remove them because they're not serving any purpose. They're not being utilized anymore.
They wouldn't be able to be used again if it was turned into general business anyways, that type of industrial tank.
Correct, yes.
So I don't see why it would be there. But is it customary for the people that do the zoning not to be here to ask them questions?
Typically, there is somebody here we can ask questions, but they were informed of the meeting. We notified all the adjoining property owners. So I've not received any phone calls in opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Lee, has there been any discussion on the tanks themselves?
None.
They wouldn't be grandfathered in for any reason, or if, let's say, they go out of the tire business in 8 months and they decide to put oil distribution back in, would that be grandfathered back in?
I don't believe oil distribution is allowed in general business. I can check and see right quick.
And one other question, where would they store used, discarded tires that were going to be transported off-site?
Well, again, they would
in
have
the
to store them in
storage?
an enclosure.
Not in a tractor-trailer parked on the site?
Well, that could be specified. That happens occasionally, too. A lot of times they'll park a tractor-trailer on. That's another one of those different businesses use tractor-trailers in different ways. Some of them use it to store debris that they're going to haul off. Some of them sell out tractor-trailers. Lowe's, for example, sells
Ace.
And Ace Hardware.
Ace Hardware. So that's a difficult thing to regulate. I think the new ordinance, we're going to try to address some of that by requiring it, if they're going to do that kind of thing, that it be in an area that's not visible from the roadway and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. You could specify that as a condition. He has to be agreeable to it, and the business owner would have to, understand that that was a requirement that you had in place. There's not a whole lot of opportunity, this is a small lot, to hide something like that. It would be a challenge to try to figure out how to accommodate for that. But they could store them in this building and then bring a tractor trailer on, stack them up, haul them off, and not leave the tractor trailer parked there. If that was something that you had interest in, we could certainly approach the owners and see if they'd be agreeable.
The oil tanks, I know removing oil tanks because of the EPA and so forth is a pretty expensive proposition. So the only time they would be removed is if they became a hazard.
Yeah, above ground tanks are a little different animal than underground tanks.
Underground's expensive.
The underground stuff, when they close those, they have to remove them. Above ground tanks, as long as the dikes and they're not storing material in those, it's probably not going to be something that's going to be required to be removed by the environmental health folks or the environmental folks at Diener.
At some
That's
point in
another
time,
question I could ask. Again, it makes sense. I think their intention is to transition this property over to more commercial use, and that's oil distribution is not something they're interested in anymore. That's not something they're doing out of this location.
But they'll become unsightly over time. So I'm just concerned about at some point in time, they will need to be removed, either that or repainted and kept up because they'll rust and become very, very unsightly and hard to cover up otherwise.
I agree.
Lee, on the conditional use, will this be able to control the display that they have so that it will not get out of hand like it has in some of the other places?
If you're very specific about it and they are in agreement to meeting those conditions, it could do that. The general business guidelines allow outdoor display, and there's really no specifications in our general ordinance how you go about doing that. You could ask that be the case here if you wanted to. But again, if they don't agree, then the rezoning is kind of dead in the water. So, I mean, the owner has to agree to the condition. It has to be a mutual consent. We can't just place conditions on it and force him to do that. I mean, it's got to be a mutual agreement. We got to agree to it, and he's got to agree to it. That's what conditional use zoning does for us.
Your feeling right now and the staff's feeling right now is this is a positive step, though, the step in the right direction.
I think so. I mean, it's industrial. It can certainly be used for a lot worse situations under the current zoning. Oil distribution is certainly not something that we want to see in this particular location long term, but it's been there for a long time, so it's we wouldn't want it converted to some manufacturing type use or uses that would be allowed in industrial type situations. Commercial is the best rezoning. It's kind of we're just taking a small bite at this apple. I think is way we're seeing it. If you want to take a little bigger bite and ask them to take a little more conditions, we'll see if they're willing to do that. I wish they were in the audience to ask that question of. You can make that recommendation. We'll see where it goes going to the city council if you want to do that.
Can you talk to them and see what kind of conditions they would do if we
Amenable to.
put it in conditional use, but not necessarily restrict to a certain type? You asking them if they can take care of that?
Yeah, I can ask. And if they do, if they do, that's great. You're recommending it. They've agreed to it. It's going to the city council for public hearing. We go to the next step. If they don't, then you've recommended that they should. They've not agreed to it. So obviously there's not a meeting of the minds. They go to the city council, and the city council is going to have to make a choice of which one whether they deny the rezoning request or let him do it with the conditions he's willing to accept.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can move the thing forward without having to bring it back here.
That's what
I think. I mean, if you feel strongly that that's the motion you want to approve, then we can move it on.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second that. I think it's the object here, of course, is to get some established business in there, but also to get general business along the corridor there, which Just
Let's hold the motion for just a moment. Are there other questions or comments for Lee at this time? Okay. Now officially, we need to open public hearing. If there's anyone present who wants to speak for the rezoning? Seeing none. Rising. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against this request from our audience? Seeing none, close the public hearing, and we'll call the question back for the council.
Okay, I recommend that we change it from heavy industrial to general business conditional use with agreements of the,
Interior use only
Yep.
of the building, and that outdoor display be limited, but I didn't hear in what manner.
it's just-
Not permanent exterior display. It has to be.
what about that? It has to be
Taken
brought
in and out
every
on a
day.
daily basis.
Well, it says the owner has agreed to require all operations be located inside the buildings other than occasional displays during normal business hours.
Right.
So, you know,
Well, I don't think they're going to want to leave tires outside anyway.
Okay, and what about, there was some tractor trailer discussion. Is that part of the motion, or?
I mean, I would put that in there. I don't think, you know, because if it's not in there, then they're going to, you could bring an 18-wheeler and
They
you
would
could put it
put
up
it
there
in
and
there.
you could
So no
do that in and out. And it
no
would just look
temporary
like an
storage
industrial
within
place again to me.
portable units or tractor trailers.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they're going to enclose that back area, you know, that's an area that they can.
Yeah, I don't know if there's room for a tractor trailer. It doesn't look like.
Yeah, that's a pretty.
There's a.
They'd have to remove pretty much the
To get in.
old tanks and stuff to have a lot of room to
And if
park
they
something in there permanently.
I'd
if
trade
they
the tractor
needed
trailer for
one,
those old
because handling those tires 2 and 3 times, moving it from a building, as a business person, I know handling something 6 times is not efficient.
Cost.
So if you have a trailer there and it's maybe screened to some extent so that it's not as visible from the roadway, I mean, it is such limited
Don't know how they
space
would
that
do
might
that.
be
Okay. That's
consideration.
motions on the floor. If whatever's Claude's willing to accept in his motion.
That's fine with me. Yes.
Okay.
Are we
Okay.
clear on the motion?
So you basically, if he does use it, screen it.
Screen
does
it,
use
and
a
none
trailer-
of the used,
Right.
none of the tires would be outside of that trailer. I mean, none on the ground.
Occasional display of new merchandise.
New merchandise only, right?
Okay.
Jackie, do you have, does someone have that?
If you do have a storage, you want screening.
If you have a tractor
A
trailer.
tractor trailer
Tractor
storage.
trailer.
Or a trailer, any kind of trailer storage. A pod, any of that kind of stuff.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Call the question. Further discussion. All in favor of the motion as it stands, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Approved. Moving on, any other items of discussion before we adjourn this evening?
Again, just to remind the folks at home that may be watching this or a future taping of this, we are continuing to work with the new zoning ordinance. We finished up another workshop today with this group. There was a newsletter that went out with the city's utility billing this past billing cycle. Most folks should have already received that. I know I got mine in the mail. There may be a couple billing folks that haven't gotten that yet, but before the next meeting, you'll definitely see it. We hope to have some sections of the ordinance, or at least the preliminary zoning map, available sometime in April for folks to start looking at it. That's our goal. If the next workshop is as productive as today was, I think we'll be about ready to do some of that. So let folks know that we are working on that, and once you have that, if you want to give me a call or some of my staff a call, we'll be happy to answer any questions on that. On the section of the ordinance, it'll be on the city's website.
Thank you, Lee. With that, good evening. We are adjourned.